that's true. Naked Palpatine.
Oh, you pick that one. Fresh out of the clone tank, nude Palpatine is my
Well, that's the first thing I think of when you say Dark Empire Palpatine.
Hello everybody, and half welcome back to the expanding universe, the other half not. Half redubbed by Disney or Lucasfilm. Which way you slice it? Legends. Today I have for you two things. I had notes, they're on my phone. I didn't put them over, but it's okay. I'll get the gist. I have one unofficial thing that I have to stress, just like I did with the Hand of Thrawn 45 story that I talked about a while back. This is not canon to the expanding universe whatsoever. It's just fanfiction. If you want to accept it, you can put it in a alternative timeline, but it is not canon to the EU. Now, my criteria for fanfiction, or if I'm going to review it, or I'm going to take the time to read it, is if it's within continuity. I'm sure there's many good stories of, like, oh, what if Anakin Skywalker didn't turn to the dark side? What if Anakin Solo didn't die? What if Jason Solo didn't fall to the dark side? Like all these different things. And that's great and all, but at that point you're essentially writing a different story, which some of you might be like, well, yeah, of course, because we hate it. That's cool, but that's not what the EU writers would have done. They would have taken the hits and moved on forward. So if I'm going to read something in continuity, or if I'm going to read a fanfiction, it's going to be within continuity. It doesn't have to necessarily be a sequel to anything. It could just be a one-off story that has nothing to do with anything, but it has to not contradict anything. It's kind of how my mind goes. And on the other hand is I also have a short story by Troy Denning called Recovery, which is in the beginning of the mass market paperback for Star by Star, but it takes place around here before Edge of Victory, though it does kind of spoil the first chapter of Edge of Victory, so it's like, basically, it says that a character died in, like, the first chapter of the short story, but in the actual novel, Edge of Victory, the person dies in, like, the first chapter, so a little bit of a spoiler there. But if you've already read this series, it's okay to read this, like, here. I'm going to start with the unofficial thing first, which is, again, I should also stress, I am biased on, because it is written by my good friend, Quinlan Vos on YouTube. So, it's going to be fun. Actually, I'm going to write this down, because I want to talk about the notes, so I'll see you in a second. Welcome back. So, in short, without getting into spoilers, it is a side mission, basically. A side thing that happened during New Jedi Order. Including many familiar faces. And the fates of some of them to explain their absence in later stuff. I have my issues with it. I'm going to talk spoilers because I need to talk about it. But it's a really fun little short story, and if you wanted to include it in your, headcanon, you could. I can't do that. I mean, I have a couple, like, author gripes with it, personally, that I don't agree with. But it was overall really fun. I'm just going to tell you a bit about it. You can decide to read it if you want. So, here we go. Sorry, frick. We got the Shiktaris. I don't know if I said that correctly. The Shikitaris. They're from the Clone Wars 2003. We also have the Piangani, which are from Empire at War. They're also referenced in Darth Bane. Zan's Consortium also gets a reference, or Zahn's Consortium, which is also, I think, referenced in Supernatural Encounters. And then we have this cat-like alien species, and one of the main characters, Sure. Or not main character, it's more like supporting character. His name is Zella Alcidos, which is a anagram of my name, which I thought was funny. Also, the big thing here. We basically have the Avengers B team. Like, the Avengers is Luke, Mara, Anakin, Jaina, Kip, Han, Leia, Luke, I guess Kenneth Hammer and all of them. But then we have the B team, which is in this short story, which is a little fanfiction-y, but I like it. We have Kyle Katarn, getting to see what Kyle Katarn was doing during New Jedi Order. Even though it's not official, it's still a lot of fun. And guess who his Padawan is now? Finn Galfridian from the Invasion comics. We also learn within this short story that Toydaria, the Watto, Money, his species, their planet's been taken out. But people have been helping smuggling people off and helping the relief effort in their own small way. Well, maybe not fighting the war, but helping in the way that they can. We have Jackson from the Marvel Comics and Dash Rendar, so I thought that was cool. Also, one of the biggest hype things, which I would love to be canon in an official story, is that Dash Janier from Dark Times is still alive, and he's fighting the good fight against the New Jedi Order, or against the Yusong Vong. Speaking of which, who else do we have in the story? We have Mandor Zuma, who's also trying to help these refugees escape. Now, retroactively, this actually fits very well, because we know that Mandor Zuma is still alive by the time of Supernatural Encounters, and Supernatural Encounters takes place after Dark Nest, which means that Mandor Zuma had to survive New Jedi Order, which I thought was awesome. We also have Tash and Zek from Galaxy Fear. They're here too. So here's the thing, right? And I have one other one for you. But I want to mention that it is a little fanfiction-y and a little much that all these characters that you know and love just happen to be together. But at the same time, it's really cool to see them all interact and stuff. There's also another Jedi I forgot to mention. I don't think he's as prevalent, or like an actual character beforehand. He might be, but he was alright. But all these characters that we know, it's weird seeing them all be in one story, but at the same time, I mean, look at New Jedi Order with all the people that pop up. So it's not necessarily the biggest deal to me, but I do understand it's very fanfiction-y for them to all be together. And the only other one we have is Ken Palpatine, which is really cool. Now, realistically, if the EU was ever to be continued, he couldn't be here because of the rights where the people that wrote Jedi Prince still technically own the rights to that character, so they would have to pay royalties every time they used Ken Palpatine. That being said, his inclusion is great, and I'm glad he was in this little short story. But the issue too is, it was a minor gripe I had with Brennan's writing, but of course this was just something he wrote for fun. But when somebody goes, Ken who? And he goes, you don't want to know. You wouldn't like it. Really? Like, he could have just said any last name, but write it where he hesitated for a second. He paused and goes, I'm Ken. Lightbringer. I don't know, some Star Wars last name. It doesn't have to be Palpatine. You don't have to say that, but so that felt a little much. But I still enjoyed his inclusion. The parts that upset me is the end of the story. Because at the end of the story, things are getting bad, and this is meant to show that the Vong are a real threat. They're heading closer to Coruscant now, and things are just getting worse and worse. Tash dies from Galaxy Fear. Now that I didn't necessarily mind, and I don't think it contradicts Supernatural Encounters because Huel's there, but he doesn't really mention whether or not his family's still with him. So I thought that worked fine. But then the bigger sin happened, which is that Finn Galfridian accidentally kills Ken Palpatine. Now, realistically, you wouldn't be able to use them at all in the actual EU, but if you're going to use them, that's such a waste of potential. And I hated that decision. I'm sorry, Brennan. He's my friend. But I hate that decision. It was an awful decision. And then Finn Galfredian. For as much as I hate this character, right, as much as I despise those invasion comics, this is what EU writers do. You could have made something fascinating with this. You could have made him a really good character. I mean, he was training under Kyle Katarn. But instead, after accidentally killing Ken, like, even if you hate Finn, like, what an unceremonious death for Ken Palpatine. And then Finn dies. And it was just a bit much. You know, Dash, Chenier, and Zack are left behind. We are left to assume that it's ambiguous. They could live, they could die. Who knows? And Commander Zuma and Kyle Katarn, of course, get off. This short story was ripe with continuity. It fit really well, and nothing here necessarily contradicts anything because all the people that die off are never brought up again in the EU. So, I mean, that's fair. But at the same time, what a waste of potential. So would I include this even in an alternative telling of the EU or something? I don't know, honestly. I don't know if I could do that. But it was a fun ride, and I did enjoy reading it, and it's my friend, so I do recommend you at least check it out. I'll leave a link in the description if I can. Anyway, moving on to Recovery by Troy Denning, which would have been the beginning of Star by Star. But it's a short story, it takes place around here. And we meet Tazar, who are Barabels, and they have the Wild Knights squadron of Jedi. And we learn that their mother is Saba. Saba will be a big important character down the road because Troy Denning's like the original character. But it's just basically a transition piece, this story. It's not necessary for really anything in the New Jedi Order, only that it really helps to show the reconciliation between Han and Leia. Because they're kind of vaguely making up in Balance Point, and then they're just all fine by the next duology. And it's like, but how does that work? And this is official. This is actual stuff. But one thing I think you have to give to Troy Denning is that he absolutely, positively, inconceivably, without being able to argue against it, he writes Han and Leia so perfectly. They fit so well. I could hear those words coming out of the actual actors. It feels so like them. I could feel it in my very bones. Troy Denning gets Han and Leia. One thing above anything else, he knows them. And it was really great to see. It was a fun little short story. Something you get for like $1.99 on Kindle if you want it, apart from the paperback. But it's a really good time, and I enjoyed it a lot. And I do think it's worth your time, so I do hope you check it out. I mean, next time, guys, when you see me, we'll be reviewing the first book in the Edge of Victory duology by Greg Keyes. Until then, may the Force be with you. Bye-bye.